This was the first time I did a full-length PBS soundtrack. That particular one, the music is really sparse. He just wanted music to go in between for segues, not underneath the whole 56 minutes. So it was very limited on the scope. And I came into that project after he had already filmed it. I've met Elam Stoltzfus, the documentary producer. His idea was to do nature documentaries, showcase places in Florida and try to get people to go visit these places and hopefully fall in love with the places and want to save them, the environmental movement. I played for the very first Earth Day, believe it or not, on Landis Green at Florida State. Our band, the 8 of us, played for the very first Earth Day. That was 40-something years ago. I've always been an environmentalist. Felt like we were not taking good care of our land here and our natural places. When I met Elam, I felt like that this was a good fit, and I had been writing these other songs on the side, and they seemed to just go hand in hand with his theme, his nature theme. And so when we met, I had half of the songs already there. Then Elam was able to do a documentary on the Apalachicola River. And so then I would actually go with him. I was sound engineer for the interviews. To me, that's the theme song of that.
The theme song that he speaks of is Deep River, sang by Tallahassee's own Pam Laws.
That particular song, she suggested the song, and I went to her house and sat down at her kitchen table, and she got out an old hymn book, and she turned to Deep River. We didn't have any accompaniment. And so I just set up the microphone and she sang a couple of verses, and then she changed keys. She tried different keys, so she could get a good take in her range. At the end I said, Pam, just hum a verse. One way to describe her voice, especially there, is it's a motherly embrace. We were going to reenact a baptism in the river. We'd heard that people use the river for baptism. They still do in places. But we were going to try to hire people and reenact this baptism. And then Elam found out that there was actually a church that still held their baptisms outdoors, and they held them at Camel Lake, which is a state park. Camel Lake flows over into a swamp that flows into the Apalachicola River, so it's connected to the river. They agreed to let us film one of their services. It was one of the most powerful and moving spiritual ceremonies I had ever attended. We met at dawn on the shores of Camel Lake. The glassy waters of the small, clear lake were surrounded by cypress trees whose needles had just turned to their fall color of burnt orange. I had just set up 2 microphones and was adjusting the levels when Pastor Geraldine Sherrard quietly began to sing, "Take Me to the Water." The congregation of 10 or 12 and the 4 candidates for baptism quietly joined in as I listened through my headphones. Their a cappella voices crescendoed into the misty morning air that surrounded the lake as they slowly got into the Spirit. It was as though we were not even there as they sang and clapped, cried, moaned, and spoke in tongues. All the pain and suffering of the world seemed to be concentrated right there and coming up out of the lake and the earth through them. As they finished the service, they recited the Lord's Prayer and then clapped hands and sang, "It will be all right, it will be all right. If I make it to that city, it will be all right," as they made their way up the hill to the parking lot. We were left there on the shores of the lake, not yet comprehending what we had just witnessed. Some famous composer, I don't know who it was, said music is the exquisite longing to be with God. The spiritual connection with music and humanity is undeniable. The baptism there, and they let go of a lot of bad stuff while they were there. And I knew that that was what they were doing. You could just feel it.
Tom T. Hall, known as a storyteller, was a highly popular singer and songwriter in the 70s and 80s. Sammy and his fellow musicians would meet him in the mid-90s.
And he was sort of been there and done that kind of thing. All the young people were having the hit records, Garth Brooks and people like Alan Jackson, and he just had said, I can't compete with those guys. The country music has taken a different direction, where he was known for his ability to tell a story and connect with people in just a really down-to-earth way. So he had basically not written anything for a long time, as far as I know. I mean, our bass player William Solberg met him at St. George Island. Tom T had built a house there and was living there coming down from Nashville, to go to the beach and live on the beach every once in a while. William invited Tom T over to our studio, a barn with a 4-track tape recorder. He had told him, we have a studio, and Tom T came over, and so there I was the engineer with this little plastic 4-track recorder, Of course, he'd been on, in Nashville, so it was pretty, I'm sure he was sort of shocked. But anyway, he brought a song with him that he had just written for his wife, and it was called St. George Isle. And it was laid back. He wasn't trying to sell a million records. It was just his feeling he loved that area. And so he was just writing about St. George Island. He played it for Jerry Evans, our keyboard player from Sop Choppy, and Jerry, he figured it out, and so he and Tom T recorded it. Tom T sang and Jerry played the keyboard. Of course, we're doing all this with headphones. Nobody could hear what we were doing because you have to wear headphones. They could hear Tom T singing, but it was electric piano, Tom T singing, and then they gave it to me, and I put on the headphones, and they went outside by the fire, and I added saxophone to it. And Tom T came back in, and I said, here. I handed him the headphones, and he listened to it. I looked over there at him, and about halfway through the song, I could see a tear going down his cheek. And it was like, wow, this is really, I didn't think he would react like that. But he was so grateful to have somebody take a song of his. We weren't trying to do a hit record or whatever. We just did music. Nashville is so competitive. And so here we are out in the middle of the woods in Sop Choppy in the National Forest doing music. He started writing more songs, and he would come in every couple of weeks with another song, and we would record them, and he would send them to his producer in Nashville. I got a phone call. He says, hey Sam, you think we can do an album of these songs? Mercury Records wants me to do an album. Think we can do it there in Sop Choppy at the Possum Club? And I just went, yes, even though I didn't know how we were going to do it. We had to literally raise the roof where they parked the tractor, moved the roof up 4 feet, enclosed it, put in a floor, bought a 24-track mixing board, 24-track recording equipment, microphones. We just set up a state-of-the-art studio right there in that barn.
Wow.
His producer came down, and he brought some Nashville musicians. 2 guys came, his drummer, dobro player, and us, and we produced this album called Songs from Sop Choppy. Of course, it never sold a lot, I don't think, but it was his one thing that he just wanted to do without trying to compete. Ended up one song on there called Little Bitty. Alan Jackson took that song and recorded it. It was a #1 hit for 2 months. During that time, there was the Nashville Network on cable. Well, they had country music all day long, and they had shows at night, live shows. And so Tom T was going to be on Primetime Country, and he invited me to come play with his band on two of the songs from that album. And so that was really a wonderful experience to go to Nashville and play on national TV. That's something.
For you NPR fans, Sammy also mentions his brief episode with Garrison Keillor.
Garrison Keillor came to Tallahassee to do a benefit for Habitat for Humanity, and it was at Ruby Diamond Auditorium. The name of the show was Tallahome Compassion, to be sort of like the Prairie Home Companion.
Right.
He was the MC. We had local talent, and it was just, you know, how he has talent from towns under 2,000. Right. We were like that, except it was a town more than 2,000, but it was local artists, and I played with Velma Fry. And we did a song, one of her songs. Velma actually ended up, he hired her to go on the road with him and to do several of his shows.
As our interview began to wind down, Sammy played a little ditty on one of his handmade flutes.
That's just without any fingers.
Less than a week after this interview, as some of you may know, Sammy lost both his mother and father to an accident in Leon County. We ask that you keep them all in your thoughts. I mention this because before I left, I was hoping he could tell me more about the photo hanging on the wall, and also if he could play me one more tune. Whole room over here, and that's a picture of your father or your grandfather?
That's my grandfather and grandmother and my mother.
What year do you think that was taken in?
It'd be 1929, something like that.
Thank you for listening to the Wakulla Summer Sunday radio program. A special thank you to our program assistant, Brett Albritton, to our editor, Chuck Robinson, to our sponsors, Palmetto Expeditions and the Florida Green Guide Association, Morris Brown Construction, the Palaver Tree Theater Company, and the Works Co-working Cafe, located at 27F Azalea Drive in Crawfordville's Midtown Center. Join us again Sundays at 4 p.m., Monday and Friday at 8 p.m., right here on Wave 94.1.